Welcome to Kambani Zambia TV, your home for fearless investigative journalism, bold analysis, and untold stories from Africa and around the world. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, tap the like, and share this video to spread the truth far and wide. We dig deeper, ask the hard questions, and uncover what others won't. This is more than news. It's journalism that holds power to account. Let's get started. Disclaimer. The content in this video is based on publicly available reports, statements, and allegations. These claims remain unverified, and we do not endorse or confirm their accuracy. This video is intended for informational and discussion purposes only.
Imagine serving as president of your country, leading millions of people, representing your nation on the world stage, and then, after your death, becoming the center of an international court battle that would pit your family against your government. A battle so intense that it would travel across borders, reach South Africa's highest appellate court, and leave an entire nation divided. That is exactly what happened in the case of Zambia's sixth Republican president, Edgar Lungu. In a dramatic and historic ruling, South Africa's Supreme Court of Appeal overturned an earlier court decision and sided with the Lungu family, rejecting the Zambian government's attempt to repatriate and bury the former president in Zambia with full state honors. The judgment has raised difficult questions. Who has the final say over the burial of a former head of state? Can a government override the wishes of a family? Did Edgar Lungu leave behind specific instructions regarding his funeral? And what does this ruling mean for Zambia moving forward? Stay with us as we unpack one of the most controversial political and legal battles in recent African history. To understand why this ruling matters, we must first understand how this extraordinary dispute began. On June 5, 2025, former Zambian President Edgar Lungu passed away in South Africa after receiving treatment for terminal esophageal cancer. His death marked the end of a significant chapter in Zambia's political history. As a former head of state, many expected that funeral arrangements would follow established traditions and protocols associated with former presidents. But what should have been a period of national mourning quickly evolved into a bitter disagreement. Almost immediately, differences emerged between the Zambian government and the Lungu family. At the center of the disagreement was a simple but profoundly important question. Who had the authority to determine how and where Edgar Lungu would be buried? The government maintained that the former president deserved a state funeral and burial in Zambia. The family, however, held a different position. What followed would become a legal and political battle, stretching across borders and attracting international attention. From the government's perspective, Edgar Lungu was more than a private citizen. He was a former head of state, a national figure, a leader whose legacy belonged not only to his family, but also to the people of Zambia. Government officials argued that state protocol and national interests justified the repatriation of the former president's remains. According to their position, Edgar Lungu should receive full state honors. Plans reportedly included a state funeral and burial at Embassy Park in Lusaka, the resting place of several prominent Zambian leaders. Government representatives further argued that discussions with the family had already produced a framework for moving forward. They suggested that agreements had been reached concerning funeral arrangements and repatriation. If true, such an agreement could have significantly strengthened the government's case, but proving that agreement would later become one of the most critical issues before the courts. As the dispute intensified, legal proceedings followed. The matter eventually landed before the Gauteng High Court in South Africa. In 2025, the High Court ruled in favor of the Zambian government. The ruling appeared to clear the way for the repatriation and state burial of Edgar Lungu. For a moment, it seemed the dispute had been resolved. The Lungu family refused to accept the decision. Led by former First Lady Esther Lungu, supported by family members and family spokesperson Makabi Zulu, they appealed the ruling. Their argument was fundamentally different from that of the government. The family insisted that burial decisions belonged to the next of kin. They argued that neither government authority nor political office erased those rights. More importantly, they maintained that Edgar Lungu himself had expressed clear wishes regarding his funeral arrangements. According to evidence presented by the family, the former president had repeatedly indicated that he did not want President Hakainde Hichilema or the Zambian government involved in his funeral arrangements. This claim would become one of the most sensitive and explosive aspects of the entire case. The family also rejected suggestions that any binding agreement had been reached with the government. They argued that discussions had taken place, proposals had been exchanged, conversations had occurred. But negotiations are not necessarily agreements, and discussions do not automatically become legally enforceable contracts. These competing narratives would soon be examined by South Africa's Supreme Court of Appeal. On June 23, 2026, South Africa's Supreme Court of Appeal delivered its highly anticipated judgment. The decision would completely transform the legal landscape surrounding the dispute. The court overturned the earlier High Court ruling. The appeal succeeded. The family won. The government lost. Writing for the majority, Justice R.M. Cately carefully examined the legal principles involved. The court emphasized constitutional protections relating to dignity, privacy, and family autonomy. These principles, the judges concluded, strongly supported the position advanced by the Lungu family. The court also examined common law principles governing burial disputes. Historically, courts have often recognized the rights of next of kin to make decisions concerning burial arrangements. According to the judgment, these rights could not simply be displaced without a clear legal basis. And that is where the government's case encountered serious difficulties. The judges found that the Zambian government had failed to establish a legal right, allowing it to override the wishes of the family. The court noted that government lawyers had argued that customs, traditions, and state protocols justified their position. However, the judges pointed out a significant weakness. No expert evidence had been presented to prove those customs or protocols. No authoritative testimony established that Zambian law gave the government the power it claimed. Without such evidence, the argument struggled to survive judicial scrutiny. This finding became a major turning point in the judgment. Another crucial issue concerned the alleged agreement between the government and the family. Government representatives argued that an understanding had been reached. The family disagreed. After reviewing the evidence, the court sided with the family. The judges concluded that the exchanges between both parties reflected ongoing negotiations rather than a completed agreement. Draft funeral programs, proposals, discussions, communications, all of these demonstrated engagement, but they did not establish a legally binding contract. The distinction was critical. Had a valid agreement existed, the outcome might have been very different. Instead, the court concluded that negotiations remained incomplete. As a result, the government's contractual arguments failed. Perhaps the most politically sensitive aspect of the ruling involved Edgar Lungu's alleged final wishes. The court accepted evidence presented by the family that the former president had repeatedly expressed a desire that President Hakainde Hichilema and the Zambian government should not play a role in his funeral arrangements. The judges considered testimony from family members and individuals close to the former president. They found this evidence sufficiently persuasive. This finding carries enormous implications. It suggests that the court viewed the former president's personal wishes as an important factor when assessing the dispute. For supporters of the family, the ruling represents a victory for dignity, personal autonomy, and respect for the wishes of the deceased. For supporters of the government, the judgment may raise questions about how former national leaders should be honored after death. Either way, the issue remains deeply emotional and politically charged. Not every judge agreed with the majority. Justice Norman delivered a dissenting opinion. He would have upheld the original High Court ruling. In his view, sufficient evidence existed to recognize an agreement between the parties. Had his position prevailed, the government would likely have succeeded. But in appellate courts, majority decisions determine the outcome. The majority ruled in favor of the family. And that ruling now stands as the court's final position. The Supreme Court of Appeal's decision marks a significant legal victory for the Lungu family. It reinforces principles relating to family autonomy, dignity, privacy, and burial rights. It also delivers a major setback to the Zambian government's efforts to organize a state burial for the former president. Yet many questions remain unanswered. Where will Edgar Lungu ultimately be buried? How will this decision affect political relations and public opinion? Will this case influence how future disputes involving former leaders are handled? And perhaps most importantly, what legacy will this extraordinary legal battle leave behind? One thing is certain. What began as a dispute over funeral arrangements has evolved into a landmark case touching on law, politics, family rights, and national identity. The debate may continue, but for now, South Africa's Supreme Court of Appeal has spoken, and its judgment has changed the course of this story forever. If you found this analysis informative, remember to like, subscribe, and share. What do you think? Should a former president's family have the final say over burial arrangements? Or should the state have greater authority when dealing with former national leaders? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.